Imagine you just raised $800 million.
Okay, that is a pretty good day.
Right. You are standing at the absolute peak of the startup mountain. You have this massive vision to build the Amazon of Africa.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah. You've hired the sharpest developers, you have state-of-the-art server architecture, and you are staring at a completely untapped market of like hundreds of millions of potential consumers.
It looks like a flawless, guaranteed victory on paper.
Exactly, on paper. And yet 2 years later, you are just bleeding cash. Your stock price is plummeting, and your brilliant strategy is completely unraveling.
All because of one microscopic detail you completely forgot to factor into those beautiful spreadsheets.
The lack of paved dirt roads in your delivery zones.
It is a phenomenal reality check. I mean, you can have all the elite ivory tower theories in the world, but if they don't map onto the gritty, unpredictable truth of the ground you are standing on, your business will fail.
Welcome to the deep dive. We are taking a sledgehammer to the traditional velvet rope of business education today.
We really are.
For anyone listening right now, whether you are trying to scale a startup from your kitchen table or prepping to defend a budget in a corporate boardroom.
Or you just want to understand the invisible forces shaping the global economy.
Right, exactly. This is for you. Because we got our hands on a comprehensive report detailing a revolutionary new MBA curriculum.
And the entire mission of this curriculum is to bypass the, $200,000 tuition fees and the academic fluff of places like Cambridge or Massachusetts.
Yeah, to strip top-tier general management down to its most ruthlessly practical, globally applicable core.
What makes this specific curriculum so compelling isn't that it just abandons the rigorous analytical frameworks of a Harvard business school.
It actually relies on them pretty heavily.
It does, but it forces those frameworks out of the hypothetical, safe confines of a textbook. It throws them into the deep end of emerging, highly volatile markets.
So we are going to look at how these tools actually function when the training wheels come off. From tech unicorns in Dubai to legacy industrial giants in India.
It's a completely different ballgame.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if we want to figure out how a business survives the real world, we first have to understand the weather system that business is operating inside.
Economic weather.
Yeah. I'm looking at the economics section here, and it draws this massive line between microeconomics and macroeconomics.
Right, which are two very different things.
I hear these terms thrown around in the financial news
Yeah.
constantly, usually by guys in suits yelling over stock tickers.
Exactly.
But for a manager actually trying to run a team or price a product, what is the mechanical difference?
Well, the easiest way to conceptualize it is scale and control. Microeconomics is the study of the fundamental atomic building blocks of your specific business.
The stuff you actually have some degree of influence over.
Yes. It is the raw mechanics of supply, demand, and price. It's not theoretical math on a chalkboard.
It's more practical than that.
Much more. It's the agonizing boardroom decision of trying to figure out exactly how much you can charge for a cup of coffee before the customer physically turns around and walks out the door.
The elasticity of the customer.
Yes, price elasticity. It is arguably the most important microeconomic concept a founder can grasp.
Because it measures how sensitive they are.
Exactly. It measures the exact degree to which your customer will change their behavior based on a fluctuation in your price. Let's look at the Cream example provided in our source material.
Cream, the massive ride-hailing app born in Dubai.
Right. When they look to expand out of the affluent areas of the UAE and push into massive, complex markets like Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, they had to confront price elasticity head-on.
Because you can't just copy-paste your Dubai pricing model into Lahore.
You absolutely cannot. In markets where public transportation is either highly unreliable or virtually non-existent, ride-hailing isn't a luxury.
It's a daily necessity.
Exactly, but the target demographic in those expansion markets had a significantly lower average income, and lower-income consumers are highly, highly elastic.
Meaning they notice every single penny.
They are incredibly sensitive to even microscopic fare changes. If Careem raises a fare by even 5% to try and boost their profit margins, they might suddenly lose 30% of their ridership volume.
Just from a tiny bump in price.
Yeah, because those riders simply cannot afford the extra cost. They will choose to walk or share a cramped minibus instead.
So the math actually punishes you for trying to raise prices.
Well, it forces you to find the absolute perfect equilibrium. Kareem's microeconomic understanding of that extreme elasticity had to dictate their entire algorithm.
They had to keep fares low enough to maintain massive daily volume.
Right, which meant their entire operational focus had to shift to ruthlessly cutting their own internal costs just to survive on those razor-thin margins.
Okay, so microeconomics is my pricing algorithm. It's the steering wheel of my car.
I like that.
That would make macroeconomics the actual hurricane the car is driving through.
That is a brilliant analogy. Macroeconomics expands the lens to the national and global level. You are no longer looking at your customer.
You're looking at the whole system.
Exactly. You are looking at inflation rates, central bank interest rates, and foreign exchange currency markets.
The stuff you can't control at all.
Not even a little bit. And for anyone managing a business in an emerging market, macroeconomics is not a luxury interest. It is a fundamental survival skill.
Because those economies experience massive, sudden volatility.
Yes, exactly.
I want to go back to this scenario I mentioned at the very beginning of this deep dive.
Jumia.
Oh, the Amazon of Africa.
Right. The e-commerce platform that tried to conquer the continent. They had the microeconomics figured out. They knew how to price a smartphone to make a profit.
But they got absolutely slammed by the macroeconomic hurricane.
Walk me through the actual mechanics of that. How does a currency devaluation destroy a business from the inside out? What's fascinating here is looking at the physical reality of what happened to Jumia, particularly in Nigeria. A currency devaluation isn't just an abstract headline.
It's a violent disruption of your supply chain.
Exactly. Let's say Jumia imports a smartphone from China. They pay for that phone in US dollars. Let's assume the phone costs them $100 wholesale.
Okay, keeping the math simple. I like it.
If the local Nigerian currency, the naira, is trading at 400 to the dollar, Jumia has to spend 40,000 naira just to buy the phone.
Right, and then they sell it for, say, 50,000 naira to local consumers.
Exactly, making a healthy profit.
Sounds like a solid business model.
Until the macroeconomic shift. Suddenly, the Nigerian government devalues the currency. Overnight, it now takes 800 naira to buy a single US dollar.
Wow. The currency just lost half its value.
Yes. So to buy that exact same $100 phone from China tomorrow morning, Jumia now has to spend 80,000 naira.
Oh, man. Their cost of goods just doubled while they were sleeping.
Yes. Now, basic microeconomics might suggest you simply pass that cost on to the consumer. Just double the retail price.
But remember price elasticity. The Nigerian consumer's salary didn't double overnight.
Exactly. They're still making the exact same amount of naira they were making yesterday. If Jumia doubles the price of the phone, demand drops to zero.
Because the consumer physically cannot afford it anymore.
And just like that, Jumia's margins evaporate. They are trapped.
They either sell the phone at a massive loss just to keep customers engaged,
or they raise the price and their warehouses fill up with unsold inventory. The macroeconomic reality of currency fluctuation completely overrode their microeconomic business model.
it destroys your ability to maintain stable pricing and predictable revenue.
Completely.
That is terrifying. So if micro is the steering wheel and macro is the hurricane, how does a leader actually see the hurricane coming before it rips the roof off the building?
That brings us to the whole concept of data and analytics.
The curriculum heavily leans on the Harvard approach to business analytics here. It describes this evolution from descriptive statistics to predictive analytics. Break that down for me.
Well, descriptive statistics answer a very basic question. What happened? It is the act of looking in the rearview mirror.
Like looking at last month's sales report.
Exactly. You aggregate your sales data from the last quarter, you put it in a pie chart, and you see that your red shoes sold 20% better than your blue shoes.
Which is useful, but
It's entirely backward-looking. The Harvard approach argues that modern management must push aggressively into predictive analytics.
which tries to answer what will happen.
Right. It attempts to answer a much more valuable and much more difficult question.
And I'm assuming you don't need a PhD in advanced mathematics to do this now, because the curriculum lists 3 very specific data tools for non-technical managers.
Hypothesis testing, regression analysis, and A/B testing.
I want to zero in on regression analysis because the source material uses the Saudi dairy giant Almarai as an example.
It's a great example to illustrate the concept.
From what I understand, regression is essentially measuring the invisible elastic bands between different variables.
That's a very good way to put it.
So if I run Almarai, I want to use regression to figure out exactly how much my milk sales in Riyadh spike for every single solitary dollar I spend on television advertising.
That is the exact mechanism. You are using statistical software to isolate variables and prove causality.
Because in business, you constantly have multiple things happening at once.
Always. You launch a new TV ad, but it also happens to be a holiday weekend, and a competitor also just raised their prices.
Right. If your milk sales go up 10%, which of those three things actually caused the spike?
Exactly. And if you assume the TV ad did it, you might spend $1 million next month on ads and get zero return.
Because it was actually the holiday weekend driving the sales.
Which is a remarkably common and incredibly expensive mistake. Regression analysis strips away the noise.
So it isolates the ad spend.
It calculates the mathematical weight of each variable, so you can confidently say, for every $1,000 we put into this specific marketing channel, we generate exactly $3,000 in new revenue.
Regardless of the weather or the holidays.
Right. It gives you an operational lever you can actually pull with confidence.
And how does A/B testing fit into that? Because that sounds a bit more grassroots.
A/B testing is brilliant in its simplicity. It's a form of real-time, live-fire experimentation.
Instead of agonizing in a boardroom for 6 months.
Exactly. Instead of debating whether the Buy Now button on your website should be green or red, you just build both versions.
You show the green button to half your website visitors and the red button to the other half simultaneously.
Then you step back and let the actual data tell you which one generates more clicks. You remove human ego and assumption from the decision-making process.
It's letting the market vote with their wallets in real time.
Precise.
But the source material takes a massive leap forward here. It doesn't just stick to these traditional statistical tools. It heavily ties the entire future of management analytics to artificial intelligence.
Yeah, if we look at the broader trajectory of where general management is heading, AI is fundamentally shifting the goalposts.
Awesome.
It's moving us from predictive analytics into what we might call prescriptive analytics. The curriculum points to Saudi Aramco as the prime example here.
Aramco. They are integrating fourth industrial revolution technologies at a scale that is hard to comprehend.
Because they aren't just looking at a dashboard of sales figures, they're dealing with millions of barrels of oil and thousands of miles of pipeline.
And human cognition simply cannot process that volume of live data.
No, it can't. Aramco isn't just using data to see what happened yesterday. They are feeding massive, continuous streams of sensor data from their refineries and pipelines into AI models.
And what did those models do?
Those algorithms can detect a microscopic vibration anomaly in a specific valve in the middle of the desert and predict that it will fail in exactly 72 hours.
Meaning they can send a technician out to fix it on day 2?
Completely avoiding a multi-million-dollar shutdown. The future of management is shifting from reacting to historical data to collaborating with AI to foresee and optimize outcomes.
Before they ever actually occur in physical reality. That is wild.
It's a total paradigm shift.
Okay, I have to stop you there and push back on one foundational economic concept mentioned in this section.
Ooh, what's that?
Because I think it directly conflicts with this idea of endless AI-driven innovation. Opportunity cost.
Opportunity cost, yes.
The curriculum defines it as the cost of the next best alternative you have to give up when you make a choice.
That's the textbook definition, yes.
And it specifically notes that opportunity cost becomes absolutely critical when capital is scarce and interest rates are high. So what does this actually mean for a founder today? If I'm listening to this and central bank interest rates are sitting at 5 or 6%, does opportunity cost mean I just shouldn't innovate?
That's a really interesting way to look at it.
Like, do I just take my startup capital, dump it into a high-yield savings account, and go play golf for a year?
That is an exceptionally astute challenge, and it cuts to the heart of corporate finance. No, it doesn't mean you stop innovating.
Okay, good.
But it fundamentally violently changes the hurdle rate for what qualifies as a good idea.
The hurdle rate.
The minimum acceptable return on your investment. Think about the last decade of near zero interest rates.
When money was effectively free.
Exactly. The opportunity cost of capital was almost zero. If you had $10 million, leaving it in a bank earned you nothing.
So you had it invested in something.
Right. So you might fund 10 different highly experimental, risky projects, hoping one of them pays off. The cost of being wrong was incredibly low.
Because you weren't missing out on any guaranteed returns elsewhere.
Exactly. But when interest rates are sky high, capital becomes incredibly expensive.
Right.
If you have that same $10 million today, you can put it in a risk-free government bond and guarantee a 5% return.
So that 5% is your new baseline.
It is your opportunity cost. If you take that money out of the safe bond and fund a risky new software project, that project better not just make a profit.
It better make significantly more than 5% to justify the massive risk you are taking.
Exactly. It acts as a forced discipline on innovation. High opportunity cost kills mediocre ideas.
Because you only deploy capital where you have the highest possible conviction of a massive outsized return.
It filters out the noise.
Okay, forced discipline. I like that. So we figured out the economic weather system. We know how to use data to predict the hurricane.
And we understand that high interest rates mean we have to be incredibly careful about where we place our bets.
Right. But how do we actually track those bets? How do we measure the rainwater we've collected?
That requires a completely different vocabulary.
And that brings us to the language of business itself, finance and unit economics.
Finance intimidates a lot of people, but the curriculum stresses a vital paradigm shift. Accounting is not just counting beans.
It's not just compliance for the tax authorities.
Accounting is the act of communicating the fundamental economic reality of an organization. It is a language.
If you cannot read a financial statement as fluently as you read a morning news report, you are managing completely blind.
You really are.
I really appreciate how the source material breaks down the three core financial statements because it uses these very grounded metaphors.
They are very helpful.
We have the balance sheet, the income statement, which a lot of people call the P&L or profit and loss, and the cash flow statement.
Right, the big three.
The curriculum calls the balance sheet a snapshot of financial health at one specific frozen moment in time. And it calls the income statement a video of performance over a period of time.
I love that comparison.
I like to think of it this way. A snapshot shows if you're smiling on a Tuesday. The video shows if you're actually surviving the whole marathon.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it. Let's deconstruct that snapshot first.
The balance sheet.
The balance sheet is entirely governed by the fundamental accounting equation, which is immutable. Assets equal liabilities plus equity.
Let's ground that. What are those three things in the real world?
Well, assets are everything the company owns that has future economic value.
So the cash sitting in the bank account.
The physical office building, the delivery trucks, and the inventory stacked in the warehouse.
Okay. And liabilities.
Liabilities are everything the company owes to outside parties. That is the massive bank loan you took out to buy the building.
And probably the unpaid invoices sitting on your desk from the supplier who delivered your raw materials last week.
Exactly. And then you have equity.
Right. What is equity, practically speaking?
Equity is the residual value. It is the true net worth of the business for the owners.
So if you took every single asset you own and sold it all for cash today,
and use that cash to pay off every single liability and debt you owe, whatever cash is left over sitting on the table is the equity.
the equation must always balance.
Always.
Right. So if I have $100 in total assets and I owe like $80 in debt to the bank, my equity is $20.
It really is that simple when you break it down.
It's that simple. Then we move to the income statement, the video,
This is what tracks revenue.
the actual money coming in from selling products. And then it subtracts all your operating expenses, like paying rent, buying inventory, paying your employees' salaries.
And the final line at the very bottom is your net profit for the year.
But here is where the curriculum throws a curveball. It highlights the third statement, the cash flow statement, as perhaps the single most critical document for an entrepreneur in an emerging market to obsess over.
Because why isn't the net profit enough?
Yeah, why isn't it?
Because profit is a theory, but cash is reality.
Wow. Profit is a theory.
The cash flow statement tracks the actual literal movement of liquid cash flowing into and out of your bank accounts on a daily basis.
Because it's the actual oxygen of the business.
You have to internalize this. Businesses, especially startups and companies in volatile markets, do not die because they lack paper profits.
They die because they run out of actual liquid cash to make payroll on a Friday afternoon.
Wait, how could a company be highly profitable on paper but still go bankrupt? That feels totally contradictory.
It happens every day due to timing mismatches. Let's say you run a software consulting firm.
Sure.
You just signed the biggest contract of your life. A massive corporation agrees to pay you $1 million for a project.
Awesome.
You deliver the project in June. On your income statement for June, you record $1 million in revenue.
Yeah.
You look incredibly wildly profitable.
Champagne popping in the office.
Exactly. But here is the catch. That massive corporation has a 90-day payment term.
Oh, no.
They aren't actually going to wire you the liquid cash until September. Meanwhile, you had to hire 10 new engineers in May to do the work, and their salaries are due on July 1st.
Your office rent is due July 1st. The server hosting fees are due July 1st.
Oh, and you don't have the cash because it's locked up in a 90-day invoice.
Precisely. You are wildly profitable on the income statement, but you are completely insolvent on the cash flow statement.
So if you cannot bridge that gap,
If you can't get a short-term line of credit from a bank to pay your staff until September, your highly profitable business will collapse and go into bankruptcy in July.
the cash flow statement reveals whether you actually have the oxygen to survive the marathon.
Profit is a theory. Cash is reality.
That needs to be framed on the wall of every startup incubator. So that's how we read the history of the business.
Yeah.
But the curriculum then moves into corporate finance principles.
Which are all about how managers evaluate the future value of a project before they spend a dime.
I'm looking at this list of acronyms, and it honestly looks like alphabet soup. NPV, IRR, EBITDA, WACC. I need you to translate these because they sound incredibly academic.
They do, but they represent the core logic of capital allocation. Let's start with the absolute foundation that underpins all of them, the time value of money.
Time value of money. Okay.
This is the universally accepted concept that a dollar in your hand today is fundamentally worth more than a dollar promised to you exactly 1 year from now.
Is that just because of inflation eating away its purchasing power?
Inflation is a factor, but the core reason is the earning capacity of the money itself.
What do you mean?
Well, if I give you a dollar today, you can immediately deposit it into a bank account earning a 5% yield. In 1 year, you will have $1.05.
Right.
Therefore, if I promise to give you a dollar next year, I'm actually giving you less value than if I handed it to you right now.
Okay, that makes intuitive sense. So
Yeah.
how does that translate to net present value, or NPV?
The source gives the mathematical formula, but I want to focus on the conceptual mechanism.
What is a manager actually doing when they calculate NTV?
Conceptually, NPV is the ultimate lie detector test for long-term investments. Imagine you are the CEO of a manufacturing company.
Okay, I'm the CEO.
Your team brings you a proposal to build a massive new factory. It will cost $10 million in cash today to build.
Right.
But they project it will generate $2 million in pure cash flow every single year for the next 10 years.
So 10 years times 2 million is 20 million. I spend 10, I make 20. That's a $10 million profit. Sounds like an automatic yes.
But you just fell into the trap because you ignored the time value of money.
Oh, right, because those future dollars aren't worth as much.
And exactly. Those $2 million chunks of cash you are getting in year 8, year 9, and year 10 are worth significantly less than the $10 million you have to hand over today.
So NPV fixes that.
NPV forces you to mathematically shrink or discount all those future cash flows back to what they are actually worth in today's dollars using a specific discount rate.
So that 20 million in future cash might only be worth, say, 12 million in today's money.
Exactly. You discount all the future cash flows, add them up, and then subtract your initial $10 million investment.
And the final resulting number is your net present value.
Right. If that number is positive, it means the factory will genuinely create new wealth for the company. It's a green light.
But if the NPV is negative,
It means the project is an illusion. It will actually destroy value over time, and you must reject it.
that is incredibly clarifying. And the internal rate of return, the IRR, it seems closely linked.
Very closely. While NPV gives you a raw dollar amount of value created, IRR gives you a percentage.
How does it work?
It is literally the exact discount rate that makes your NPV equal perfectly zero. Think of IRR as the true annualized break-even interest rate of the project.
So if a project has an IRR of 15%,
It's generating a much better return than your 5% bank account. It allows managers to compare the efficiency of two completely different projects, regardless of their total size.
okay, let's pivot to the acronym that dominates every single earnings call on Wall Street. EBITDA.
Earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization.
Why do we need this? Why can't we just look at the net profit line to see if a company's doing well?
Because net profit can be heavily distorted by things that have absolutely nothing to do with how well a company sells its core product.
Like what?
Let's imagine you are an investor comparing two identical software startups. One is headquartered in Dubai, where the corporate tax rate is effectively zero.
Okay.
The other is headquartered in London, which has a significant corporate tax burden.
If I just look at net profit, the Dubai company is going to look vastly superior, right? because they're keeping all their cash.
Yes, but that superiority is an illusion created by geography and government policy, not operational excellence.
The London company might actually have better software, better salespeople, and happier customers.
EBITDA strips away those external distortions. It removes the impact of different tax jurisdictions. It removes the impact of how the company is financed, whether they have high-interest debt or no debt at all.
So it isolates the pure, core operational engine of the business.
It allows you to see exactly how much cash the daily operations are throwing off, creating a perfectly level playing field to compare the true performance of two different entities.
It's the purest measure of the underlying engine. That makes perfect sense. And the last big one in this finance section, WACC.
The weighted average cost of capital.
What does that actually mean?
Think of WACC as the invisible gravitational pull on a company. Every dollar a company uses to fund its operations comes from somewhere, and it all has a price tag.
Right, money isn't free.
If a company borrows money from a bank, the cost is the interest rate on the loan. If the company raises money from equity investors by selling shares, the cost is the return those investors expect to receive for taking on the risk.
So WACC is just blending those two costs together into one average percentage.
Precisely. And that blended percentage becomes the absolute floor for survival.
The floor.
Yes. If your company's WACC is 8%, it means you are paying an average of 8% a year just for the privilege of holding the money you use to operate.
Therefore, any single new project you undertake must generate a return higher than 8%.
If you invest in a new product line and it only yields a 7% return, you are mathematically bleeding to death. You are destroying shareholder value. WACC is the ultimate hurdle rate.
Okay, I want to take all of this heavy financial theory, NPV, cash flow, unit economics, and look at how it manifests in the real world when a company is growing at a terrifying speed.
The source provides this phenomenal case study on Nubank for exactly this.
Right. Nubank is a massive digital bank operating in Brazil, Mexico, and Colombia, and they are a masterclass in re-engineering the math of an industry.
The Nubank case is arguably one of the most elegant applications of unit economics in modern financial history.
How did they start?
They looked at the traditional banking landscape in Brazil and saw a massive inefficiency. The legacy banks were immensely profitable, but they achieved those profits by servicing a very small, very wealthy segment of the population.
And charging them exorbitant fees to maintain massive networks of physical, marble-floored bank branches.
Exactly. But Nubank didn't try to steal those wealthy clients.
They targeted the millions of everyday working-class people who were completely unbanked or underbanked because they couldn't afford the fees.
They found a glaring hole in the fabric of the financial system. But to serve a lower-income demographic, they had to fundamentally alter their unit economics.
They couldn't charge high fees, so they couldn't afford physical branches.
So Nubank launched as a purely digital app-only entity. By eliminating the bricks-and-mortar footprint, they radically, violently slashed their operating expenditure, or OPEX.
And because their structural costs were so astonishingly low, they were able to offer high-quality credit cards with absolute zero annual fees.
And the market response was explosive.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The source notes that at their peak growth phase, Nubank was attracting 41,000 new customers a day.
A day.
It's an unbelievable metric.
But here's my question, bridging this back to the cash flow statement. We talked about how fast growth usually requires massive cash burn.
Right. How does a company like Nubank add 40,000 users a day without their burn rate absolutely incinerating their cash reserves before they become profitable?
That is the ultimate high-wire act for any hyper-growth startup. And Nubank survived it because they possessed a flawless understanding of customer acquisition cost versus lifetime value.
Think about the unit economics of a digital product.
Yes, Nubank had to spend hundreds of millions of dollars upfront in cash to build the software architecture, the security protocols, and the banking licenses. That is a massive initial burn rate.
So the heavy lifting is all at the beginning.
Exactly. But once that digital infrastructure is built and stress-tested, the marginal cost to add one more customer drops to nearly zero.
Right, because it's just software.
It costs Nubank almost nothing to generate a new digital account for customer number 10 million. And because they grew entirely through word of mouth, because people loved the zero fees, their marketing and acquisition costs were microscopic compared to legacy banks.
So even though the revenue they made from each individual customer was tiny, the cost to serve them was even tinier.
Yes. The unit economics were pristine. They proved that if your cost to acquire and serve a customer is fundamentally lower than the revenue they generate over their lifetime, you can scale indefinitely.
They reach 127 million users profitably because the underlying math of their digital engine was infinitely scalable.
They rewired the entire financial ecosystem of Latin America by just understanding their OPEX. Incredible.
But all of this financial modeling assumes one critical thing, that customers actually want to buy what you are selling.
Right, you can track your cash perfectly, but how do you convince the market to hand over that cash in the first place?
We have to move from the spreadsheet to the battlefield. Strategy and marketing.
The curriculum is highly explicit in redefining marketing here. It is not merely selling or advertising.
In the top-tier MBA tradition, marketing is the comprehensive, holistic process of creating, communicating, and delivering value to a customer in a way that generates sustainable profit for the organization.
It is the architecture of desire.
And the blueprint for that architecture is the classic 4Ps product: price, place, promotion. I want to look at Almarai again, the Saudi dairy company, to anchor this.
Almarai is the perfect canvas for the 4Ps because they operate in an incredibly unforgiving environment. Let's start with product.
A product must solve a tangible problem.
For Almarai, the product was not just liquid milk. The true product was the absolute guarantee of safety and freshness,
They had to deliver milk across the scorching heat of the Arabian desert.
guaranteeing it would be fresh for consumption within 24 hours of leaving the farm. The invisible product was trust in the cold chain.
Then there is price. The source points out that in emerging market, pricing strategy is often heavily constrained by external realities,
Like very low median household incomes or straight government subsidies on staple foods like bread and milk. You don't have infinite pricing power.
which forces you to find your margins through operational efficiency rather than just hiking prices.
But the third P place, or distribution, is where Almarai truly differentiated itself.
This is what fascinated me. If you study business in the US or Europe, place usually means getting your product onto the shelves of a massive Walmart or Tesco supermarket.
You deliver 100 pallets to one giant building.
But Almarai couldn't rely on that model. They had to focus on the bakalas.
The bakalas. These are the tens of thousands of tiny, independent, family-run neighborhood grocery shops that form the absolute central nervous system of retail in Saudi Arabia and the wider region.
So an effective marketing strategy had to acknowledge local truth.
The Saudi consumer didn't always want to drive 20 minutes to a hypermarket for a carton of milk. They wanted to walk 50 yards to their corner bakala.
But the logistics of that are a nightmare, right? Instead of delivering one huge truckload to a supermarket, you have to deliver 5 cartons of milk to 10,000 different tiny shops every single morning before sunrise.
It is a logistical leviathan. But Almarai recognized that mastering that complex distribution network was their ultimate competitive moat.
By successfully targeting the bakalas, they embedded their product into the daily walking routine of the consumer.
And the final P, promotion, is simply telling the story of that quality to build brand loyalty.
But even if you nail your 4Ps, you are not operating in a vacuum. You are in a cage match with other companies trying to take their customers.
And that brings us to the holy grail of competitive analysis, Michael Porter's 5 forces.
This framework is legendary. Walk me through how a manager actually uses this to diagnose their industry.
Porter's 5 forces is a diagnostic tool to determine the ultimate profit potential of an industry. It asks a simple question. How much power do you genuinely hold to dictate your own destiny, and how much power is held by the forces around you?
What's the first force?
The threat of new entrants. How easy is it for a smart 20-something to raise money, start a company tomorrow, and steal your market share?
Well, for Almarai, I imagine that threat is basically zero.
Exactly. The barrier to entry in the desert dairy industry is astronomical. You need billions of dollars to build climate-controlled cowsheds, massive irrigation systems for feed, and a nationwide fleet of refrigerated trucks.
Those massive capital requirements act as a fortress wall.
The threat of new entrants is incredibly low, which protects Almarai's long-term profitability.
But the curriculum contrasts that heavily with the bargaining power of buyers, using the ride-hailing industry as the counterexample. Kareem versus Uber.
If I'm Almarai, I own the milk. But if I'm Kareem, my buyer, the rider, holds an absurd amount of power.
Because the switching costs in ride-hailing are literally zero.
If a rider opens the Kareem app and sees a surge price they don't like, it takes them exactly 2 seconds to close the app, open Uber, and check the alternative.
The customer is entirely frictionless.
When the buyer has that much power and zero loyalty, it forces the companies into perpetual margin-crushing price wars just to maintain their user base.
Okay, the third force is the bargaining power of suppliers. This is when the people you buy your raw materials from start squeezing you.
And the source uses a massive Indian conglomerate, Reliance Industries, as the example here.
How do they deal with supplier power?
Reliance originally started as a textile manufacturer. They made fabric. But they realized that the suppliers who sold them the raw chemical materials to make that fabric held too much power over their profit margins.
If the chemical suppliers raised prices, Reliance suffered.
So Reliance engaged in what is called backward integration. They didn't just negotiate better contracts, they literally built their own massive petrochemical plants and oil refineries.
They traveled backward down their own supply chain and became their own supplier.
They neutralized the supplier power by absorbing it.
They just bought the whole supply chain. That's one way to solve the problem. The fourth force is the threat of substitute products. I see companies misunderstand this one all the time.
They think a substitute is just their direct competitor.
But the curriculum makes a critical distinction here.
It is a vital distinction. If you run a traditional commercial bank, your direct competitor is the bank across the street offering a slightly better interest rate on a checking account. A substitute product is entirely different.
It is a completely different technology or business model that solves the exact same fundamental customer problem.
So for a bank, the threat of a substitute isn't another bank. It's Apple Pay. Or a telecom company offering mobile money transfers through text messages.
Precisely. The customer's problem is, I need to move money from point A to point B. They don't inherently care if a bank does it.
If a mobile phone provider can do it faster and cheaper, the entire banking industry faces an existential substitute threat. You have to look outside your own industry borders to spot the real danger.
And the final, fifth force is the intensity of rivalry. How bloodthirsty is the competition within your current market?
The curriculum points out that in highly saturated markets with fierce rivalry, companies often engage in mutually assured destruction through price wars.
Which brings us to arguably the most mind-bending case study in this entire report. Reliance Industries Limited, or RIL, and their launch of the Jio Telecom network in India.
The Jio case study is a masterclass in aggressive, paradigm-shifting strategy. It redefines the concept of corporate stability.
Let me set the stage, because the audacity of this is staggering. By 2016, Reliance was already an absolute titan in India. They were hugely profitable.
But their leadership looked at the telecom sector, which was dominated by established players making massive, stable profits off traditional 2G and 3G voice call models charging by the minute.
Reliance decides to enter this market. But they don't just compete. They spent tens of billions of dollars building a pure, state-of-the-art 4G data network from scratch.
And then when they launched Jio, they offered 4G data completely free for months and made all voice calls permanently free.
They unleashed a thermonuclear price war on an entirely stable, profitable industry.
And this is what I don't understand. Why would a massive publicly traded corporation intentionally destroy the profitability of an industry they are trying to enter?
Isn't stability the ultimate goal?
Okay.
Why burn billions of dollars giving away free data?
Because they understood the fundamental trajectory of the digital economy. The leadership at Reliance recognized that the old model of charging for voice minutes was eventually going to die anyway.
Data was the future.
But more importantly, this raises a profound question about the nature of strategy itself. Stability can often be a trap.
A trap? How so?
If you cling to a stable, profitable legacy business model while the underlying technology of the world shifts, you are just waiting to be disrupted by a nimble startup.
So Reliance adopted a mindset of intentional cannibalization.
They knew that if someone was going to destroy the lucrative Indian telecom pricing structure, it better be them. They were willing to cannibalize the short-term cash-generating structures of the entire industry to achieve a much larger, longer-term strategic objective.
They wanted to completely own the Indian digital consumer.
By giving them an offer they physically could not refuse. Free high-speed internet in a country hungry for connectivity.
Exactly. They endured massive short-term financial pain to acquire hundreds of millions of users at breakneck speed.
They devastated their competitors, many of whom went bankrupt or were forced to merge just to survive the onslaught.
But once Jio became the dominant, undisputed gateway to the internet for a massive portion of the Indian population, the trap snapped shut.
Because now they had the audience.
Yes, And they leveraged that massive captive connected user base to build a sprawling digital ecosystem. They didn't just stay a telecom provider.
They expanded into digital retail, streaming entertainment, financial services, and cloud computing.
The core lesson here for modern managers is ruthless but essential. You must possess the courage to completely dismantle and destroy your own current business model if you see the future shifting.
You have to sacrifice the comfortable present to secure your relevance in the future.
That takes a level of boardroom courage that is, frankly, terrifying. But here's the thing. A brilliant strategy like Geo's intentional disruption or Almarai's Bacala distribution plan, these are just elegant hallucinations in a PowerPoint presentation if you don't actually have the physical machinery to pull them off day after day.
You need to execute.
And that brings us to Module 4, Operations and Digital Architecture, hitting the road.
Operations is where the theoretical elegance of strategy collides with the friction of physical reality.
It is the rigorous discipline of designing, managing, and continuously improving the actual systems that create and deliver the product to the customer.
The source anchors this heavily in the concepts of operational excellence and lean thinking, pointing directly back to the historical gold standard, the Toyota production system.
And the entire philosophy seems to boil down to maximizing value and relentlessly hunting down and eliminating waste.
And a huge part of that hunt is finding the bottlenecks.
Bottlenecks dictate the ultimate speed of your entire organization.
I picture it like a massive 5-lane superhighway where cars are flying along at 80 miles an hour. But suddenly those 5 lanes merge into a single unpaved dirt road.
It doesn't matter how fast the cars were going before or how big the highway is afterward.
The absolute maximum speed of that entire transportation system is entirely constrained by how many cars can squeeze through that one dirt road. For a manager, your only job is to find the dirt road in your company and pave it.
That is the perfect visualization of the theory of constraints. Historically, paving that dirt road meant optimizing physical things, moving a machine closer to the assembly line, or redesigning a warehouse layout.
But the curriculum explicitly states that in the modern era, removing bottlenecks requires digital transformation. However, it issues a very stern warning against the corporate buzzwords surrounding this topic.
Yes, it makes a very sharp distinction. Digital transformation is not just writing a massive check to buy the latest enterprise software, installing it, and hoping productivity goes up.
Simply digitizing a broken, inefficient physical process just gives you a broken, inefficient digital process.
The source defines true digital transformation as architecting the outcome. It requires a fundamental shift in managerial mindset.
You have to move away from the IT department's mindset of project delivery, which means installing the software and walking away.
And adopt a mindset of product ownership, which means you are constantly, relentlessly optimizing that digital tool to generate better business results over its entire life cycle.
And the curriculum provides some very specific high-impact mechanisms for how companies are doing this. Let's look at First Abu Dhabi Bank, FAB. Again, they implemented something called RPA.
Robotic process automation.
RPA is essentially deploying software robots to take over the highly repetitive, high-volume, mind-numbingly boring administrative tasks that humans traditionally do.
Data entry, form processing, routine compliance checks.
And the impact is staggering. The report notes that by implementing RPA across their back-end operations, FAB saved 1.3 million hours of manual human work.
Think about the operational velocity that unlocks. You aren't just saving money on salaries, you are freeing up thousands of intelligent human beings to stop doing data entry and start doing complex, creative problem solving.
It fundamentally elevates the human capital of the organization. The text also highlights cloud migration as a critical operational pillar.
By moving data storage and processing power off local physical servers and into the cloud, companies achieve dynamic scalability.
They can ramp up computing power instantly during a massive sales event and scale it back down when it's over, paying only for what they use.
And it mentions Saudi Aramco partnering with Samsung to build localized private 5G networks directly inside their industrial facilities to handle that massive real-time AI data processing we talked about earlier.
It's about building the nervous system for the AI.
But I want to bring operations back to the physical world because the text does a massive deep dive into Almarai's operational architecture, specifically focusing on vertical integration.
We touched on their distribution earlier, but their actual operational footprint is unbelievable.
They don't just buy milk from farmers and package it. They own the cows, tens of thousands of them.
They own the massive desert farms, they own the high-tech processing and pasteurization plants.
And they own the fleet of trucks that deliver to the 100,000 bacalas. They own the entire chain.
That absolute end-to-end control is the purest definition of vertical integration.
In many Western markets, a company might outsource distribution to a third-party logistics firm to save money.
But in the Middle East, specifically in the highly perishable food and beverage sector, vertical integration is not a cost-saving measure. It is an absolute strategic necessity for survival.
Because of the environment.
Precisely. Almarai has to manage the cold chain. They have to guarantee with absolute certainty that the milk remains at an exact, uninterrupted, refrigerated temperature from the second it is extracted from the cow to the moment a customer pulls it out of a fridge in a bacala in the middle of a 115-degree summer afternoon.
If they rely on a third-party trucking company and that company's refrigerator fails for 20 minutes,
The milk spoils, the brand trust is destroyed, and the customer gets sick. Vertical integration is how they buy absolute control over quality.
okay, I understand why they do it, but I have a major question here. If Almarai controls literally every single step from the cow to the consumer, doesn't that make them an operational fortress?
They don't rely on anyone.
Yet the text explicitly points out that their operations remain highly vulnerable. How is a vertically integrated fortress vulnerable?
Because no matter how tall you build your operational walls, you still exist on planet Earth. Operations do not exist in a vacuum.
Right.
Vertical integration protects Almarai from local supplier unreliability, but it simultaneously exposes them to massive, unavoidable, global macroeconomic shocks.
Ah, the hurricane we talked about in Section 1.
Exactly. Think about the physical inputs required to maintain that fortress in the desert. You cannot grow enough grass in the Saudi desert to feed tens of thousands of dairy cows.
Almarai has to import millions of tons of alfalfa and grain from North America and South America.
Furthermore, running a massive fleet of refrigerated trucks and running giant processing plants requires immense amounts of diesel fuel and energy.
Oh, I see it now. So if a geopolitical conflict breaks out in Eastern Europe and global grain prices double overnight, or if global oil markets spike, Almarai's pristine, vertically integrated operational machine suddenly becomes devastatingly expensive to run.
And there's absolutely nothing their internal managers can do to stop it.
They are completely tethered to global commodity markets. They cannot control the external shock.
But what their operations can do, and what the curriculum highlights they are doing aggressively, is use digital transformation to mitigate the damage.
Almarai utilizes AI-driven predictive analytics to digitalize their supply chain.
They track global weather patterns affecting grain harvests. They optimize truck routing in real time to save fractions of a gallon of fuel.
And they predict exactly how much milk a specific bolical will sell on a specific Tuesday so they don't waste a single drop. They use digital efficiency as a shield against global volatility.
Squeezing out every microscopic ounce of waste just to survive the global price shocks. That is brilliant.
So we've built a strategy, we've tracked cash flow, we've optimized the supply chain with AI and robots. But here is the profound reality check. Software algorithms do not make ethical decisions when the company is in crisis.
A predictive AI model cannot inspire a burnt-out team to work through the weekend to hit a deadline.
All of these MBA frameworks eventually collide with the most complex, unpredictable, and messy variable in any business: human beings. Which brings us to leadership, inclusion, and sustainability.
This is where the curriculum pivots from the cold mechanics of business into the soul and culture of an organization.
It attempts to synthesize two very different but complementary approaches to managing people.
From Harvard, it pulls the lead concept, leadership and organizational behavior. This is deeply introspective.
It focuses on how a leader's personal moral compass, their self-awareness, and their biases directly shape the culture of the firm.
It teaches that you cannot simply motivate intelligent employees by barking orders and relying on your formal title.
You can't just manage by spreadsheet.
Right. And from Cambridge, it integrates the concept of management praxis. Praxis is the highly practical behavioral study as how you actually execute strategy through other people.
It moves beyond simple authoritative control toward the highly sophisticated art of influence, negotiation, and aligning diverse human motivations toward a single corporate goal.
And a massive, non-negotiable pillar of this modern curriculum is the concept of inclusion.
The report points out that top-tier MBA programs now mandate specific coursework on inclusion and the broader social purpose of the firm.
It's trying to kill this outdated notion that diversity initiatives are just nice-to-do PR stunts led by HR. The curriculum argues that inclusion is a hard operational requirement for long-term competitiveness.
And we see this philosophy vividly brought to life in the case study of Lubna Olayan. Her tenure as the CEO of the Olayan Financing Company is presented as a masterclass in what the text calls intentional leadership.
She was an absolute pioneer in the region, the first woman to lead a major Saudi family conglomerate, and later the first woman elected to the board of a publicly listed Saudi company.
And her operational leadership style was apparently formidable. The text describes her as having a bias for standards, transparency, and flawless execution.
But it's her philosophical stance on inclusion that really anchors this section. She operated on the fundamental belief that competitiveness and inclusion are inseparable.
Yes, and she didn't just speak about it at conferences, she operationalized it. Long before widespread national policy shifts occurred, she recognized that ignoring half the population's talent pool was a massive competitive disadvantage.
She launched the Onward program within her conglomerate. The explicit goal was to actively identify, train, and place talented women in serious professional and executive roles across the company, based entirely on rigorous merit and performance.
So her legacy isn't just the fact that she made her company immensely wealthy. Her legacy is the structural cultural change she proved was possible.
She proved on the P&L statement that merit-based, inclusive advancement is the most sustainable, profitable path forward.
She demonstrated that inclusive leadership builds a more resilient and innovative corporate structure.
The text pairs her profile with another contemporary powerhouse, Hana Al-Rostamani, the group CEO of First Abu Dhabi Bank. We discussed FAB earlier in the context of their massive digital transformation, the millions of hours saved by RPA bots, and their shift to cloud computing.
Right, the bank is basically turning into a giant software company.
Exactly. But navigating an organization through that kind of radical technological upheaval induces massive anxiety in the workforce and the customer base.
Al-Rastamani's leadership philosophy relies heavily on clarity and empathy to counter that anxiety.
Empathy during an AI rollout.
Yes, she operates on the principle that trust is a competitive advantage. As the bank automates processes and utilizes algorithms to make loan decisions, she ensures that the leadership never loses sight of the human element.
She dictates that the bank must maintain a relentless, customer-first mindset. Technology is simply the delivery mechanism, but deep human trust is the actual product the bank is selling.
If the customer feels they're just interacting with a cold algorithm, they will leave. Empathetic leadership is what keeps the digital transformation grounded in human reality.
Trust is incredibly fragile, though, and maintaining that trust at a corporate level brings us to the concept of corporate governance.
The curriculum defines governance as the system by which companies are directed and controlled. It's the rule book for making sure the executives don't act like absolute dictators and destroy the company for their own short-term gain.
The mandate is to maximize shareholder value legally, ethically, and on a sustainable basis.
And to illustrate the complexity of governance, the source uses a fascinating example from India. Infosys, the massive global IT consulting firm.
Infosys is legendary for its ethical standards. Their founders famously operated under the mantra that the spirit of the law is much more important than the mere letter of the law.
Meaning you don't just look for legal loopholes, you do what is actually right.
Correct. It is a profound statement of corporate morality. But the curriculum highlights a severe governance dilemma that even Infosys had to face.
For decades, the company was run by its visionary, charismatic founders who possessed immense moral authority. But eventually, founders age and step down.
Infosys had to transition from founder-led management to bringing in outside, professional, non-founder CEOs to run the daily operations.
And that transition is usually where the friction starts.
Massive friction. It illustrates the deep structural tension that arises between the people who birthed the company and fiercely protect its original values, and the professional executives brought in whose primary mandate is to aggressively scale profits and satisfy Wall Street.
Managing that tension, ensuring the professional management doesn't dilute the foundational ethics in pursuit of quarterly earnings, is the ultimate test of a corporate board of directors. Governance is the shock absorber for that friction.
And in the modern era, that governance mandate has expanded dramatically. It's no longer just about protecting the shareholders, it's about protecting the planet. Sustainability.
The curriculum makes it clear that operating sustainably is no longer an elective class you take for extra credit. It is embedded into the core strategy based on the triple bottom line: profit, people, planet.
Modern investors demand that companies possess a social purpose. meaning the organization must exist to actively solve a societal or environmental problem, not merely extract profit while ignoring the collateral damage.
The report gives a few quick examples, like Upfuse in Egypt, which is a social enterprise producing lifestyle products from upcycled plastic waste, proving you can build a brand around environmental remediation.
And FAB raising massive amounts of capital through green bonds that are strictly ring-fenced to fund renewable energy projects.
But I want to spend time on the most comprehensive sustainability case study in the text, Masdar City in Abu Dhabi. Because the lesson here is entirely counterintuitive to what you usually hear about environmental projects.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Masdar City is a phenomenal case study in the collision between utopian vision and macroeconomic reality.
Let's set the baseline. Masdar City was launched in 2006 with a staggeringly ambitious goal: to construct the world's first fully sustainable, entirely zero-carbon, zero-waste urban development from scratch in the desert.
And they were using incredible innovations to do it. Passive architectural design, like orienting the buildings and narrowing the streets to capture prevailing winds and create natural shade, dropping the ambient temperatures significantly.
Plus, massive active technology investments, like sprawling solar farms to power everything. It was designed to be a pure, uncompromising environmental utopia.
But the curriculum uses Masdar City not to celebrate its initial utopian goals, but to examine its 15-year evolution, because the reality check arrived violently in 2008.
The global financial crisis.
Yes. The crisis fundamentally altered the global cost of capital and the economic realities of real estate development. If the leadership at Masdar had acted like stubborn, pure idealists, they would have insisted on maintaining their strict zero-carbon targets, regardless of the soaring costs.
And if they had done that.
The project would have run completely out of cash and failed entirely. It would have been an abandoned monument in the desert.
But because they were effective managers, they adapted. The curriculum points out that Masdar's leadership made the incredibly difficult, highly pragmatic decision to scale back some of their initial pure zero-carbon targets.
Wait, so the MBA lesson here is that abandoning your pure environmental goal is actually good management.
It is the difference between idealism and impact. They pivoted to a more financially prudent approach. They realized that an environmental project that goes bankrupt helps no one.
They balanced the desire for extreme sustainability with the hard requirement of commercial viability.
They learned that achieving net zero is a noble, attainable goal, but sustainability must be deeply, inextricably embedded into the actual financial reality of the business model. It cannot just be an uncompromising philosophical stance.
By adapting to the economic reality, they ensured the city actually got built and continues to serve as a living, functioning laboratory for green technology today.
You have to survive the balance sheet to save the planet. That is a tough pill to swallow, but it makes absolute sense. So we've designed our product, we've optimized our supply chain, we've established an inclusive culture, and we are operating with sustainable governance.
The final question is, how do we fund massive global expansion? What happens when a company needs billions of dollars to scale, and the realities of local markets crash into the ambitions of global capital?
We have arrived at the final section, the engine of capitalism and the ultimate reality check.
The stock market. It is the engine that allows human ambition to scale. It allows companies to raise astronomical amounts of capital without taking on crippling bank debt, while simultaneously democratizing wealth creation by allowing everyday individuals to own a microscopic piece of the world's most profitable enterprises.
The curriculum demystifies the market by breaking down its absolute core mechanics. And I want to skip past the basic definition of what a stock is and jump right into the distinction the text makes between the primary market and the secondary market, because I think 90% of the public completely misunderstands how this works.
It is the most common misconception in finance. The primary market is the arena where a company creates new shares and sells them to the public for the very first time.
This is the initial public offering, the IPO. When a company executes an IPO, the money invested by the public goes directly into the company's corporate bank accounts.
It is new capital the company can use to build factories, hire engineers, or expand globally.
But once that IPO event is over, the stock moves to the secondary market.
Yes. The secondary market is what we see on the news every day. The New York Stock Exchange, the NASDAQ, the Saudi Tadawul. If you log into your brokerage app on your phone right now and buy 100 shares of Apple stock, Apple Corporation does not receive a single penny of your money.
You are just buying those shares from another random investor who decided to sell them today.
Precisely. The secondary market is a closed loop of investors trading among themselves. The prices fluctuate minute by minute based entirely on the aggregate psychology of the market supply, demand, fear, and greed.
And we track that psychology using indices like the S&P 500 or the FTSE 100. But if an individual manager or investor wants to look under the hood of a specific company and see if the stock price is actually justified by reality, the curriculum highlights valuation metrics.
We have market capitalization, which is just the total number of shares multiplied by the current price. It tells you the total size of the company.
We have dividend yield, which is essentially the cash interest rate the stock pays you just for holding it. But the metric that dictates everything is the PE ratio, price divided by earnings per share. I need to make sure I grasp the real utility of this.
The PE ratio is the ultimate gauge of market expectations.
Right. So if I'm looking at a company with a massive PE ratio, say 100, am I basically looking at a metric that tells me how expensive the hype surrounding the stock is compared to the actual physical profits the company generated last year?
That is a very cynical but fundamentally accurate interpretation.
Yeah.
Yes. If a mature manufacturing company earns $1 per share in profit and its stock price is $10, it has a PE ratio of 10. You are paying $10 for every $1 of current profit. It is considered cheap or fairly valued.
But if a hot new AI software startup earns that exact same $1 per share, but its stock is trading at $100, its PE is 100.
Why would anyone pay 10 times more for the exact same dollar of profit?
Because they aren't buying the current profit. They are buying the future. A high PE ratio means the market is priced in massive, explosive future growth. Investors believe that $1 of profit will become $20 in 5 years.
The danger, of course, is that if the company stumbles and fails to deliver that explosive growth, the hype evaporates, the PE multiple compresses, and the stock price crashes violently, even if the company is still technically profitable.
The expectations crush the reality. Now, to see how the primary market operates at the absolute highest, most intense level possible, the curriculum provides the case study of the Saudi Aramco IPO from 2019. It remains the largest public offering in the history of global capitalism. They raised $25.6 billion and established an initial valuation of $1.7 trillion.
It was a monumental, historic event in the primary market. Strategically, it was the cornerstone of Vision 2030, designed to generate massive liquidity to diversify the Saudi economy away from pure oil dependence. But the curriculum focuses on the Aramco IPO to illustrate the agonizing difficulty of price discovery.
Meaning, how do you actually decide what a $1.7 trillion company is worth on day one?
Exactly. Determining the IPO price of Aramco was incredibly complex. Because when you enter the public markets, you are no longer just dealing with your own balance sheet. You are dealing with the sentiment and the anxieties of global institutional investors.
During the roadshow to pitch the IPO, many international investors in London and New York were cautious. They were concerned about the long-term volatility of global oil prices, the rising ESG movement steering funds away from fossil fuels, and specific geopolitical risks in the region.
So even the absolute most profitable corporate entity on the face of the earth is completely at the mercy of how a fund manager in New York feels about the geopolitical weather.
It is the ultimate lesson in market mechanics. Fundamentals are not enough. Because of that international caution, Aramco's underwriters had to rely much more heavily on robust local and regional demand from Saudi and Gulf investors who deeply understood the asset and were highly confident in the valuation. The lesson is that the public market is an arena of psychology as much as it is an arena of finance.
Which brings us perfectly to our final and perhaps most sobering case study in the entire curriculum, the ultimate reality check. We opened this deep dive talking about Jumia. We discussed how their margins were destroyed by the macroeconomic shock of currency devaluation in Nigeria. But the text closes by examining their broader operational failure. Jumia styled itself to Wall Street as the Amazon of Africa. They had a highly successful IPO, raising those hundreds of millions of dollars. The hype was deafening, but they failed to scale profitably.
Jumia serves as the definitive cautionary tale against the arrogance of copy-pasting a successful Western business model into a structurally different emerging market. Jumia's executives and their investors made a fatal, sweeping assumption. They looked at the data and saw that mobile internet penetration was rising rapidly across the African continent. They assumed that because people had smartphones, e-commerce adoption would automatically mirror the explosive trajectory it had in the United States or Europe.
They assumed that consumer behavior would just naturally follow the technology.
Yes, but they tragically misjudged the physical, economic, and cultural realities of the ground they were standing on. They ignored what the curriculum calls local truth.
Let's break down those local truths, starting with the dirt roads I mentioned in the intro.
The infrastructure deficit. In the West, Amazon's model relies on highly efficient, subsidized postal systems, massive networks of paved interstate highways, and standardized GPS-mapped home addresses. Jumia tried to implement next-day delivery in cities like Lagos, Nigeria. But Lagos suffers from massive traffic gridlock, a lack of standardized street addressing, and highly unreliable road networks. The sheer physical friction of getting a package from a warehouse to a customer-specific front door was exponentially harder and vastly more expensive than delivering a package in suburban London.
The unit economics of the delivery completely broke down.
Completely. And then they ran into a massive cultural barrier regarding trust and payments. In the U.S., consumers input their credit card numbers into a website without a second thought. But in many of Jumia's target markets, institutional trust in digital payment gateways was very low. Therefore, to get any sales at all, Jumia had to rely on cash on delivery.
Oh, wow. So the delivery driver is basically acting as a walking bank branch.
Yes, which creates a logistical nightmare. The driver has to physically collect the cash, carry it safely, and bring it back to the depot. But worse, cash on delivery creates astronomical return rates. If the customer isn't home or simply changes their mind when the driver arrives, the sale is canceled. Jumia still had to pay for the fuel, the driver's time, and the warehouse packing, but they collected zero revenue.
So they were burning cash on the forward logistics and burning cash on the reverse logistics. And you combine that with the inflation and currency devaluation we talked about earlier. It's a perfect storm. The core takeaway the curriculum provides from the Jumia disaster is summarized in one stark quote: "Global models don't scale without local truth."
It is the defining mantra for emerging market management. You cannot succeed by simply building a slick app designed for the tiny, affluent, urban elite who happen to own iPhones. If you want to scale in an emerging market, you must deeply customize the operational experience for low-spec Android devices operating on spotty 3G networks. You must design your unit economics to profitably target the actual massive middle-class people who might only be earning $200 to $300 a month. You must build your operations around the reality of cash economies and unpaved roads. The ground reality always wins.
The ground reality always wins. We have covered an immense, almost overwhelming amount of ground today. Let's synthesize the journey we've taken through this modular MBA curriculum. We started by learning how to read the economic weather, understanding how the microeconomic price elasticity of a customer dictates our algorithms, and how macroeconomic hurricanes like currency devaluation can wipe out our margins overnight. We learned that data must move from looking in the rearview mirror to predicting the future using regression and AI. We established that profit is a theory, but cash flow is reality, and we saw how Nubank rewired the unit economics of a whole continent by slashing OPEX to offer zero-fee banking.
We watched Reliance Jio intentionally cannibalize its own industry's pricing structure in a brutal 4G war just to capture the long-term digital consumer. We saw how Almarai utilizes massive vertical integration to control the cold chain and uses AI to defend that fortress against global grain shocks. We explored how leaders like Lubna Olayan mandate inclusion as a competitive weapon, and how Masdar City proved that adapting your utopian sustainability goals to survive a financial crisis is actually the hallmark of effective management. And finally, we saw how the stock market prices all of this ambition, and how Jumia proved that you cannot copy-paste your way to success without respecting the gritty, unpaved local truths of your market.
When you pull all of those disparate threads together, the finance, the strategy, the operations, the leadership, the central thesis of this entire curriculum emerges with absolute clarity. General management, stripped of all its academic pretense, is fundamentally about one single competency: decision-making under severe uncertainty. It is the ability to read the narrative hidden inside a spreadsheet, the courage to cannibalize your own product before the market does it for you, and the empathy to lead human beings effectively when the future is completely opaque.
Decision-making under uncertainty. It's not just a corporate skill, it's an evolutionary survival mechanism.
But stepping back and looking at everything we've discussed, this curriculum raises a final, highly provocative question that it leaves unresolved.
What is it?
If the absolute core foundation of management is human decision-making under uncertainty, and we are rapidly accelerating into an era where artificial intelligence like Aramco's predictive pipeline maintenance or FAB's automated robotic processes is systematically, mathematically eliminating that uncertainty, what does the role of the human business leader in the year 2040 actually look like? When the neural network can flawlessly predict the macroeconomic supply chain shock, automatically calculate and set the optimal price elasticity for millions of customers simultaneously, and preemptively reroute the logistics trucks to avoid the operational bottleneck before it even occurs. What is left for the CEO to decide? Do we still manage the business? Or do we merely manage the algorithms that run the business?
Wow. If the velvet rope finally comes down, but the AI is the one taking the wheel, what is the premium on human instinct? That is a profound thought to chew on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. The next time you walk down the street and buy a carton of milk at a neighborhood shop, or open a ride-hailing app to get home, or see a headline flashing about a massive tech IPO, we invite you to look at it through this new lens. Look for the invisible unit economics. Spot the bottlenecks. Search for the local truth. You don't need a $200,000 ticket to see the matrix. You just need to know where to look. We'll see you next time.